Section 1, The Living Faery Faith, from The Faery Faith in Celtic Countries by W.Y. Evans Wentz. Public domain, please do not sue. This is Chapter 1, The Environment. In the beauty of the world lies the ultimate redemption of our mortality. When we shall become at one with nature, in a sense profounder even than the poetic imaginings of most of us, we shall understand that now we fail what we fail to discern. Fiona MacLeod. And in this chapter is covered psychical interpretation, the mysticism of Erin and Armorica, in Ireland and Scotland, in the Isle of Man, in Wales, in Cornwall, and in Brittany. This recording will be limited to about 15-30 minutes. As a preliminary to our study, it is important, as we shall see later, to give some attention to the influences and purely natural environment under which the fairy faith has grown up. And in doing so, it will be apparent to what extent there is truth in the naturalistic theory, though from the first of our interpretation of environment is fundamentally psychical. In this first chapter, then, and so far as they can be recorded, we shall record a few impressions which will, in a way, serve as introductory to the more definite and detailed consideration of the fairy faith itself. Ireland and Brittany, the two extremes of the modern Celtic world, are for us the most important points from which to take our initial bearings. Both washed by the waters of the ocean of Atlantis, the one an island, the other a peninsula. That's my daughter in the background. They have been best preserved, their old racial life in its simplicity and beauty, with its high ideals, its mystical traditions, and its strong spirituality. And, curious though the statement may appear to some, this preservation of older manners and traditions does not seem to be due so much to geographical isolation as to subtle forces so strange and mysterious that to know them they must be felt, and their nature can only be suggested, for it cannot be described. Over Erin and Armorica, as over Egypt, there hovers a halo of romance, of strangeness, of mysticism real and positive, and, if we mistake not the language of others, these phrases of ours but echo opinions common to many Celts native of the two countries. They who have the first right to testify, and not only are there poets and seers among them, but men of the practical world as well, and men of high rank in scholarship, in literature, and art, and even in science. In Ireland. If anyone would know Ireland and test these influences which have been so fundamental in giving to the fairy faith of the past something more than mere beauty of romance and attractive form, and something which even today, as in heroic ages, is ever living and ever present in the centres where men of the second sight say that they see fairies in that strange state of subjectivity which the peasant calls fairyland. Let him stand on the hill of Tara silently and alone at sunset, in the noonday, in the midst of a dark day. Let him likewise silently and alone follow the course of the Boyne. Let him enter the silence of Newgrange and of Douth. Let him muse over the hieroglyphics of the Locrue. Let him feel the mystic beauty of Killarney, the peacefulness of Glendalough, of... I can't pronounce all these words. Sorry. Monstera Boys of... I'm going to skip some of these. I'm sorry. Let him dare to enter the rings of the fairies, to tempt the good folk at their raths and forts. Let him rest on the ancient cairn above the mountain place of Finvara and look out across the battlefields of Moytura. Let him wander amid the fairy dales of gentle Connemara. Let him behold the Irish Sea from the heights of Howth, as Finn MacCool used to do. Let him listen to the ocean winds amid Dunangus, and let them view the stronghold of Cuchulainn and the Red Branch Knights. Let him linger beside the mysterious lake which lies embosomed between the two prehistoric cairns on the summit of the enchanted Silvagolion, where yet dwells invisible the mountain's guardian, a fairy woman. Let him then try to interpret the mysticism of an ancient Irish myth in order to understand why men have been told that in the plain beneath this magic mountain of Ireland mighty warfare was once waged on account of a bull by the hosts of Queen Maeve against those of Cuchulainn, the hero of Ulster. Let him be lost in the mists of the top of Binbolben. Let him know the haunts of fairy kings and queens in Roscommon. Let him follow in the footsteps of Patrick and Bridget and Columba. When there are dark days and stormy nights, let him sit beside a blazing fire of fragrant peat in a peasant's straw-thatched cottage, listening to tales of Ireland's golden age, tales of gods, of heroes, of ghosts, and of fairy folk. If he will do these things, he will know Ireland and why its people believe in fairies. And yet little has been said concerning the effects of clouds, of natural scenery, of weird and sudden transformations in earth and sky and air, which play their part in shaping the complete fairy faith of the Irish. But what we are about to say concerning Scotland will suggest the same things for Ireland, because the nature of the landscape and the atmospheric changes are much the same in the two countries, both inland and on their rock-bound and storm-swept shores. In Scotland, in the moorlands between Trossachs and Aberfoyle, a region made famous by Scott's Rob Roy, I have seen atmospheric changes so sudden and so contrasted as to appear marvelous. What shifting of vapors and clouds, what flashes of bright sun gleams, then twilight at midday. Across the landscape, shadows of black dense fog banks rush like shadows of flocks of great birds which darken all the earth. Palpitating fog banks wrap themselves around the mountain tops and then come down like living things to move across the valleys, sometimes only a few yards above the traveler's head. And in that country live terrible water kelpies. When black clouds discharge their watery burden, it is in the wind-driven vertical water sheets through which the world appears as though an ice-filmed window pane. Perhaps in a single day there may be the bluest of heavens, the clearest air, the densest clouds, and the blackest shadows, the calm of the morning and the wind of the tempest. At night in Aberfoyle, after such a day, I witnessed a clear sunset and a fair evening sky. In the morning when I arose, the lowlands along the river were inundated, and 1,000 cascades, large and small, were leaping down the mountain highlands, and rain was falling in heavy masses. Within an hour afterwards, as I travelled on towards Stirling, the rain and wind ceased, and there settled down over all the land cloud masses so inky black they seemed like the fancies of some horrible dream. Then like massed armies they began to move to their mountain strongholds, and stood there, while from the east came perfect weather and a flood of brilliant sunshine. And in the Highlands from Stirling to Inverness, what magic! That changing colors and shadows there were on the age-worn treeless hills, and in the valleys with their pure, clear streams receiving a tribute from unnumbered little rills and springs, some dropping water drop by drop as though it were fairy distilled, and everywhere the heather giving to the mountain landscape a hue of rich purplish brown, and to the air an odor of aromatic fragrance. On to the northwest beyond Inverness there is the same kind of treeless highland country. And then after a few hours of travel one looks out across the water from Kyle and beholds Skye, where Cuchulainn is by some believed to have passed his young manhood, learning feats of arms from fairy women. Skye, dark, mountainous, majestic, with its waterfalls turning to white spray as they tumble from cliff to cliff into the sound from out the clouds that hide their mountain summit sources. In the Outer Hebrides, I'm not sure about that pronunciation, as in the Erinmore Islands off West Ireland, influences are at work on the Celtic imagination, quite different from those in Skye and its neighbouring islands. Mountainous billows which have travelled from afar out of the mysterious watery waste find their first impediment on the west of these isolated Hebridean isles. And they fling themselves like mad things in full fury against the wild rocky islets fringing the coast. White spray flashes in unearthly forms over the highest cliff. An unrestrained hurricane whirls it far inland. Ocean's eternally murmuring sounds set up a responsive vibration in the soul of the peasant, as he in solitude drives home his flocks amid the weird gloaming at the end of a December day, and later when he sits brooding in his humble cottage at night, in the fitful flickering of a peat fire, he has a mystic consciousness that deep down in his being there is a more divine music compared with which that of external nature is but a symbol and an echo. And as he stirs in the glowing peat embers, phantoms from an irretrievable past seem to be sitting with him on the edge of the half-circle of dying light. Maybe there are skin-clad huntsmen of the sea and land, with spears and knives of bone and flint and shaggy sleeping dogs, or fearless sea rovers resting wearily on shields of brilliant bronze, or maybe Celtic warriors fierce and bold. And then he understands that his past and his present are one. Commonly, there is the thickest day darkness when the driving storms come in from the Atlantic, or when dense fog covers the sea and land. And again, there are melancholy sea winds moaning across from shore to shore, bending the bushes of purple heather. At other times, there is a sparkle of the brightest sunshine on the ocean waves, a fierceness foreign to the more peaceful Highlands. And then again, dead silence prevails at sunrise and at sunset if one be on the mountains, or if on the shore no sound is heard save the rhythmical beat of the waves, and now and then the hoarse cry of a seabird. All these contrasted conditions may be seen in one day, or each may endure for a day, and the dark days last nearly all winter. And then it is, during the long winter, that the crofters and fisher folk congregate night after night in a different neighbor's house to tell about fairies and ghosts, and to repeat all those old legends so dear to the heart of the Celt. Perhaps everyone present has heard the same story or legend 100 times, yet it is always listened to and told as if it were the latest bulletin of some great world-stirring event. Over those little islands so far away to the north, out over the edge of the world, in wintertime darkness settles down at 4 o'clock or even earlier, and the islanders hurry through with their dinner of fish and oat bread so as not to miss hearing the first story. When the company has gathered from far and near, pipes are refilled and lit, and the peat is heaped up, for the storytelling is not likely to end before midnight. The house is roomy and clean, if homely, with its bright peat fire in the middle of the floor. There are many present, men and women, boys and girls. All the women are seated, most of the men. Girls are crouched between the knees of the fathers and brothers or friends, and while boys are perched wherever, boy-like, they can climb. The houseman is twisting twigs of heather into ropes to hold down thatch. A neighbor crofter is twining quicken root into cords to tie cows, while another is plaiting bent grass into baskets to hold a meal. The housewife is spinning, a daughter is carding, another daughter is teasing, while a third daughter, supposed to be working, is away in the background conversing in low whispers with the son of a neighboring crofter. Neighbor wives and neighbor daughters are knitting, sewing, or embroidering. Then the bad weather for fishing has been fully discussed by the men, and the latest gossip by the women, and the foolish talk of the youths and maidens in the corners is finished. The one who occupies the chair of honor in the midst of the Celtic, not sure about that one, looks around to be sure that everybody is comfortable and ready. And as his first story begins, even the babes by instinct cease their noise and crying, and young and old bend forward eagerly to hear every word. There's a footnote at the end of the page. The Celtic of the Western Hebrides corresponds to the Vili of Lower Brittany and to similar storytelling festivals which formerly flourished among all the Celtic peoples. The Celtic is a literary entertainment where stories and tales, poems and ballads are rehearsed and recited, and songs are sung, conundrums are put, proverbs are quoted, and many other literary matters are related and discussed. Alexander Carmichael, Carmina Gaydelica. It does not matter if some of the boys and girls do topple over asleep, or even some of the older folk as the hour gets late. The tales meet no interpretation in their even unbroken flow. And here we have the most Celtic and the most natural environments which the fairy faith enjoys in Scotland. There are still southern Highlands in the country around Oban, and the islands near them, and of all these isles none is so picturesque in history as the one Columba loves so well. Though Iona enjoys less of the wildness of the Hebrides further west, it has their storm winds and fogs and dark days, and their strangeness of isolation. On it, as Adaman tells us, the holy man fought with black demons who came to invade his monastery, and saw angelic hosts, and when the angels took his soul at midnight in that little chapel by the seashore, there was a mystic light which illuminated all the altar like the brightest sunshine. But nowadays, where the saints saw demons and angels, the islanders see ghosts and good people. And when one of these islanders is taken in death, it is not by angels, it is by fairies. In the Isle of Man. In the midst of the Irish Sea, almost equidistant from Ireland, Scotland, and Wales, and concentrating in itself the psychical and magnetic influences from these three Celtic lands, and from Celto-Saxon England too, lies the beautiful kingdom of the great Tuatha De Danann god, Manannán mac Lir, or, as his loyal Manx subjects prefer to call him, Manannán I don't know Welsh. I'm not going to pretend to. In no other land of the Celt does nature show so many moods and contrasts, such as perfect repose at one time, and at another time the mightiness of unloosed powers, when the baffled sea throws itself angrily against the high rock-bound coast, as wild and almost as weather-worn as the western coast of Ireland and the Hebrides. But it is nature's calmer moods which have greater effect upon the Manx people. On the summit of his ancient stronghold, South Barrule Mountain, the god Manannán yet dwells invisible to mortal eyes, and whenever on a warm day he throws off his magic mist blanket, with which he is wont to cover the whole island, the golden gorse or purple heather blooms become musical with the hum of bees, and sway gently on breezes made balmy by the tropical warmth of an ocean stream flowing from the far distant Mexican shores of a new world. Then in many a moist and sweet-smelling glen, pure and verdant, land birds in rejoicing bands add to the harmony of sound as they gather on the newly plowed field or dip themselves in the clear water of the tinkling brook. And from the cliffs and rocky islets on the coast comes the echo of the multitudinous chorus of seabirds. At sunset on such a day, as evening calmness settles down, weird mountain shadows begin to move across the dimly lighted glens, and when darkness has fallen, there is a mystic stillness broken only by the ceaseless throbbing of the sea waves, the flow of brooks, and the voices of the night. In the moorland solitudes, even by day, there sometimes broods a deeper silence, which is yet more potent and full of meaning for the peasant, as under its spell he beholds the peaceful vision, happy and sunlit, of sea and land, of gentle mountains falling away in land waves into well-tilled plains and fertile valleys. And he comes to feel instinctively the old druidic fires relit within his heart, and perhaps unconsciously he worships there in nature's temple. The natural beauty without awakens the divine beauty within, and for a second of time he, out of his subconsciousness, is conscious that in nature there are beings and inaudible voices which have no existence for the flippant pleasure-seeking crowds who come and go. To the multitude, his ancestral beliefs are foolishness, his fairies but the creatures of a fervid Celtic imagination which readily responds to unusual phenomena and environments. They will not believe with him that all beauty and harmony in the world are but symbolic, and that behind these stand unseen sustaining forces and powers which are conscious and eternal. And though by instinct they willingly personify nature, they do not know the secret of why they do so. For them the outer is reality, the inner is not existent. From the age of stone to the civilized era of today, the Isle of Man has been, in succession, the home of every known race and people who have flourished in Western Europe, and though subject in turn to the Irish Gael and to the Welsh Brython, and to the Northmen and to Danes, to Scots and to English, and the scene of sweeping transformations in religion as pagan cults succeeded one another to give way to the teaching of St. Patrick and his disciples, St. German and St. Magold, and this finally to the Protestant form of Christianity, the island alone of the Celtic lands has been strangely empowered to maintain in an almost primitive purity its ancient constitution and freedom. And though geographically at the very center of the United Kingdom, it is not part of it. The archaeologist may still read in mysterious symbols of stone and earth, as they lie strewn over the island's surface, the history of this age-long panoramic procession of human evolution. While through these same symbols the Manx seer reads a deeper meaning, and sometimes in the superhuman realm of radiant light, to which since long ago they have oft come and oft returned, he meets face to face the gods and heroes whose early tomb stands solitary on the windswept mountain top and moorland, or hidden away in the embrace of wildflowers and verdure amidst valleys. And in the darker mid-world he sees innumerable ghosts of many of these races which have perished. In Wales. Less can be said of Wales than of Ireland or Scotland as a whole. It has, it is true, its own peculiar psychic atmosphere, different no doubt, because its people are Brythonic Celts rather than Gaelic Celts. But Wales, with conditions more modernized than is the case in Ireland or the Western Hebrides of Scotland, does not now exhibit in a vigorous or flourishing state those Celtic influences which, when they were active, did so much to create the precious romances of Arthur and his brotherhood, and to lay the foundations for the Welsh belief in the Celtic, the Faery race still surviving in a few favoured localities. And I know I mispronounced that, sorry. Wales, like all the Celtic countries, is a land of long sea coasts, though there seems to be, save in the mountains of the north, less of the mist and darkness and cloud effects than in Ireland and Scotland. In the south, perhaps the most curious influences are to be felt at St. David's Head and in St. David's itself, once the goal for thousands of pilgrims from many countries of medieval Europe, and probably in the pagan times the seat of an oracle. And a place of like character is the peninsula of Gower, south of Swansea. Caerphilly Castle, where the Green Lady reigns now amid its ruined acres, is a strange place, and so is the hill near Carmarthen, where Merlin is asleep in a cave with the fairy woman Vivian. But in none of these places today is where a strong living faith in fairies as there is, for example, in West Ireland. The one region where I found a real Celtic atmosphere, and it is a region where everybody speaks Welsh, is the mountainous country rarely visited by travelers save archaeologists a few miles from Newport, and its center is the Pentre Evan Cromlech, the finest cromlech in Wales, if not in Britain. And by this prehistoric monument, and in the country round the old Nevern Church, 3 miles away, there's an active belief in the fair folk, in ghosts and death warnings, and in death candles and phantom funerals, and in witchcraft and black magic. Thence on the Newcastle Emmeline, with its valley where many of the Merovingian stories took place, or at least from where they drew rich material in the way of folklore, are environments purely Welsh and is little disturbed by the commercial materialism of the age. There remain now to be mentioned 3 other places in Wales to me very impressive psychically. These are ancient Harlech, so famous in recorded Welsh fairy romance, Harlech with its strange stone circles, an old castle from which the Snowdon Range is seen to loom majestically and clear, and with its sun-kissed bay, Mount Snowdon with its memories of Arthur and Welsh heroes, and sacred Anglesey or Mona, strewn with tumuli and dolmens and pillar stones. Mona, where the Druids made their last stand against the Roman eagles, and its little island called Holyhead, facing Ireland. However, when all is said, modern Wales is poorer in its very atmosphere than modern Ireland or modern Brittany. Certainly there is a good deal of this fairy atmosphere yet, though it has become less vital than the similar fairy atmosphere in the great centres of Erin and Armorica. But the purely social environment under which the fairy faith of Wales survives is a potent force which promises to preserve underneath the surface of Welsh national life, where the commercialism of the age has compelled it to retire in a state of temporary latency, the ancestral idealism of the ancient Brythonic race. In Wales, as in Lower Brittany and parts of Ireland and the Hebrides, one may still hear in common daily use a language which has been continuously spoken since unknown centuries before the rise of the Roman Empire. And the strong hold on which the Druidic Eisteddfod, an annual national congress of bards and literati, continues to have upon the Welsh people, in spite of their commercialism, is again a sign that their hearts remain uncorrupted, that when the more favorable hour strikes they will sweep aside the deadening influences which now hold them in spiritual bondage, and become, as they were in the past, true children of Arthur. In Cornwall, strikingly like Brittany in its physical aspects, southern and western Cornwall is a land of the sea, of rolling plains and moorlands rather than of high hills and mountains, a land of golden yellow furze bloom, where noisy crowds of black crows and white seagulls mingle together over the freshly turned or new-sown fields, and where in the springtime the call of the cuckoo is heard with the song of the skylark. Like the Isle of Man from the earliest ages, Cornwall has been a meeting place and a battleground for contending races. The primitive dark Iberian peoples gave way before the Aryan Celtic invaders, and these to Roman and then to Germanic invaders. Nature has been kind to the whole of Cornwall, but chiefly upon the peninsula whose ancient capital is Penzance, which possibly means the Holy Headland. And upon the land immediately eastward and northward of it she has bestowed her rarest gifts. Holding this territory embosomed in the pure waters of ocean, and breathing over it the pure air of the Atlantic in spring and the summer calm, when the warm vapors from the Gulf Stream sweep over it freely, and make it a land of flowers and of singing birds, nature preserves eternally its beauty and sanctity. There are there ruined British villages whose builders are long forgotten, strange prehistoric circular sun temples like fortresses crowning the hilltops, mysterious underground passageways, and crosses probably pre-Christian. Everywhere the records of the mighty past of this thrice holy druid land of sunset. There are weird legends of the lost kingdom of fair Lyonesse, which seers sometimes see beneath the clear salt waters, with all its ancient towns and flowery fields. Legends of Phoenicians and Oriental merchants who came in for 10. Legends of gods and of giants, of pixies and fairies, of King Arthur in his castle at Tintagel, of angels and of saints, of witches and of wizards. I'm going to stop there. So next time I will finish the description of Cornwall, and I will move on to Brittany, and it probably won't take very long, so I'll be able to move into chapter 2, which is the taking of evidence, which will go into detail about a lot of the observations that he made about the folklore and stories that he gathered in these many places. So until next time.